Hello everyone and welcome to our session on K with the arts and cultural sector, and I'm really delighted to introduce Susie Layton, who you can see on screen here, and Evelyn Wilson, who is having some internet problems at the moment but hopefully will join us shortly. Susie and Evelyn are co-directors of the Culture Capital Exchange and co-conceivers and directors of the National Centre for Academic and Cultural Exchange, which is a new initiative funded by Research England and which will be the subject of our session today. Susie will be diving straight into some pretty participatory activity whilst we wait for Evelyn to join us, but she'll give you a little overview of what NCACE is all about just while we let everybody come in from their coffee breaks. The focus of today is going to be a little bit about some work they've done with Arts Professional on how the arts and cultural sector view and undertake knowledge exchange, which I think is going to be really interesting for us and a really interesting kind of segue from where we were yesterday when we were talking about social sciences and knowledge exchange. So I think there's some parallels there that we'll see, and a really good follow-on from this morning's session about skills as well, and the kind of competencies we need in knowledge exchange. So lots of links we're making as we go through conference. I've always found Susie and Evelyn to be tremendously energetic and passionate about knowledge exchange, and the NCACE and TCC events that I've gone to have always given me a completely new perspective on knowledge exchange. So I'm really looking forward to today's session. Over to you, Susie.
Thank you, Tamsin, and thanks for the build-up. Let's hope I can live up to it. I'm absolutely delighted to be here this morning. As Tamsin said, my co-director Evelyn is having hideous internet problems. Apparently there's a national issue with Virgin and she's having to run around the corner to a local sort of co-working space to try and get on their non-Virgin Wi-Fi. So we had planned to ease you in gently by giving you a lovely presentation all about NCACE and the data that we gleaned from our arts professional survey that Tamsin mentioned, but instead I'm going to throw you into the deep end to actually make you do a bit of the work. First up, before we get started, it would be great if people could click on the link to the Google Doc that I've posted in the chat, just to have it open in the background before we go into breakout groups, because I know you won't be able to access the main chat once we do that. I'm just going to very quickly introduce myself and the centre a little bit more before we go into the breakout groups. Not going into too much detail though, because we will pick that up in the presentation that Evelyn will hopefully be joining us in time to give. So my name's Susie Layton. I am, as well as co-directing the National Centre for Academic and Cultural Exchange, co-director of an organisation called the Culture Capital Exchange that has been around for roughly 15 years, working at the interface of collaboration between the arts and cultural and creative sectors and higher education. We were delighted last year to receive funding from Research England to establish the National Centre for Academic, Cultural and Cultural Exchange, and our focus is very much evidencing the social, cultural and environmental as well as economic impacts of exchange and collaboration between the arts and cultural sector and higher education. So it's very much knowledge exchange is our absolute focus, and that is what differentiates us from other organisations that we are, of course, working and liaising with, such as the Creative PEG and the Centre for Cultural Value. So now plunging into the deep end, we're going to spend a bit of time because collaboration is absolutely at the heart of all our work and everything that we do. We want to spend a little bit of time with you this morning, giving you an opportunity to think about your collaborative practice and to hear back from you about, what the tools, the assets, the IP, the skills, the capabilities that you engage when you undertake collaboration and knowledge exchange, where you feel your really sort of strengths are, and where NCACE as an organisation or the wider sector may be able to support capacity for creative knowledge exchange going into the future. So I'm going to ask you to spend 5 or 6 minutes in a personal reflection of the assets that you use in enacting knowledge exchange, collaborations and partnerships, using the categories that are in the document that I've asked you to open. Just jot down a few notes against each category if you can. A brief list of illustrative examples for each category is included at the end of the document. Please keep in mind what the specific needs and requirements of the arts and cultural sector might be when you're thinking about this. And if you haven't collaborated with the arts and cultural sector before, that's absolutely fine, just take a guess. So just spend 5 minutes or so thinking about your own practice and work around KE. And then in your groups, I'd like you just to discuss the following. What areas of the octagon that you'll be looking at do you find yourself drawing on most often when you're enacting and developing knowledge exchange collaborations? What areas of knowledge exchange collaborations are underdeveloped or under-resourced in terms of your own capacity or that of your institution? And what would be helpful in addressing any capacity or development gaps you or your team might have with regard to knowledge exchange collaborations? And also, we'd love to hear from you if you think there's anything missing from our list of KE collaborations. And as a group, it would be great if you could just pick 2 or 3 key points to feed back to the main discussion, probably through dropping into the chat, but hopefully we'll have time to hear from a few of you. So everything I've just said is in the document that I've linked you through to. If anyone's having problems accessing that, do let me know. And perhaps we can go into our breakout groups. I will warn you when I want you to be moving on to group discussion, and we'll give you a minute or so warning before you come back to the main room. So control, if we could go into our groups, please.
Breakout rooms will now be opening.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm delighted to say that Evelyn has managed to get a connection, so we'll continue as planned.
Thank you, Tamsin, and thank you all. As I said before, apologies for throwing you in the deep end there, particularly people who maybe joined the session a little bit late. We've just got a few minutes now, and I think there were 4 groups of you. So maybe we could just ask a representative from each group to feedback really quickly on your discussions, and if anyone else would like to chime in, just kind of drop comments on the chat. So could I maybe ask someone from group 1 to unmute and give us your quick sort of feedbacks and thoughts from your discussion?
I guess I'll chime in, though. Apologies, I can't turn on my camera. I'm John Matier from the University of York, and one of the things that Ruth Moore and I and others were talking about a little bit was communication and the needs to be able to speak the language that's used in the arts and cultural sector that's different from the way academia works. And this can filter into issues with regard to the structuring of agreements and the assignment of intellectual property and so forth. And so understanding that people do similar tasks in different ways and talk about them differently is very important to make the most out of these types of collaborations. I don't know if any of my other breakout group members want to add anything else there.
No, thanks, John. I mean, you're absolutely right. Language is key from the very earliest enactment of a collaboration. And I often have to remind myself that working across higher education and the arts and cultural sector just simply means that I'm fluent in 2 different jargons, and that, you know, it is a huge potential barrier to collaboration, but with a bit of thought can easily be overcome. Can I invite someone from group 2 maybe to give us a couple of key points?
So I think I was group 2, I can't quite remember. Yeah, we talked, a couple of the main strands that we talked about were funding, actually a bit more of a barrier than anything else, in that the organisations, you know, can't necessarily find match funding or only have a small amount to invest from that point of view. And quite often our, you know, our academics might be working with just individuals, so it's not necessarily sort of companies to work with. And the other aspect we talked about was sort of a mix between your societal and political, in that it was about sort of using that place-based initiatives. So I'm from the University of Kent, so in Kent we've got Medway making a bid to be a city of culture. So if you like, there's a lot going on there that we can help with, and we're looking at sort of a docking station project in the area. And also we've got a new Institute for Creative and Cultural Industries, which is tying in with that area. So it's almost, if there's those structures in place that are bringing things together anyway, it makes it easier rather than trying to just start from within, which is very different from maybe a, you know, an engineering project where you've got the links, you've got some big companies with money that they want to invest to make X, Y, Z. So it's sort of that funding and the place side of things we focused on.
Great, thank you, Janine. Anyone from Group 3?
I'm afraid I'm not entirely sure which group I was in.
Well, go for it, Fraser. Fraser's group.
Okay, certainly not my group. Absolutely not my group. We found that we focused towards the bottom of the octagon. So the human, looking upside down here, creative and cultural, and the social aspects were the assets that we pulled on most when we were developing relationships with the non-academic community. There was aspects of financial that were coming into it. I mentioned about an internal fund that we have at Glasgow that we exploit, where match funding is required. So we use that as a tool to develop partnerships. But Kate Spicer from Liverpool was talking about how part of the partnership development they did with the museum sector was to open up their facilities, such as the library, to enable the museum sector to access their facilities. That's a quick kind of overview of what we were talking about. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
I know that was pretty much a summary of what we said.
Thank you. And then the fourth and last group, please. Anyone?
Go on, I'll volunteer.
Natalie, thank you.
Also from York, so York heavy feedback here. We picked up a lot of similar points that have already come up. So we talked about language as well, and often about not even about going beyond the academy. We had quite a few people in our group who were moving into this area from other areas of KE, that actually often the academics working in this area use different language as well to what they might be used to. So that was an important point that came up. We also talked about the fact that the industry is quite fragmented, and so understanding the landscape of that can be quite different to other fields that people have worked in. And we also talked about place-based initiatives as well. Creative Cardiff was an example that colleagues from Cardiff brought up. Anyone else from the group want to add anything?
No, we just to say it was really nice to chat to people and meet other people and have conversations. I think we could have just kept on chatting. So we kind of talked around the houses and ignored the questions a little bit, but
no, that's absolutely fine. And I mean, I'm sure Evelyn will come on to it in her presentation. I'm going to hand over to her momentarily, but one of the issues that has come up in our research prior to the bid and our conversations during the NCACE project is the lack of spaces for people working in knowledge exchange, particularly with the arts and cultural sector, to meet each other and have these conversations. And just to flag up, we do have a network, the Knowledge Impacts Network, with a meeting coming up on the 23rd of June, and I expect there's information in Evelyn's presentation, but I will just pop a link into the chat in a moment. So without any further ado, really, I'd like to thank you for allowing us to throw you in the deep end and start with that discussion. But now Evelyn is going to take over and tell you all about NCACE, what we're doing and how you can get more involved with us.
Thanks so much, Susie, and thanks so much, Tamsin, for inviting us to be here. And I am so sorry, but in Brighton this morning, we had this sort of Virgin Media's just gone down in our part of town. So I've quickly run to a co-working space, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to share. Can I share my screen okay then? Let me just see. So I'm trying to sort of, so can't actually
Do you want to share yours, Susie? Because we know that you did that earlier, didn't you?
Yeah, because it's not sort of, for some reason, it's not quite letting me. You can't see my screen, can you?
No.
No. Okay.
Susie's done it.
So I will just sort of spend the next, I'm so sorry, because actually Susie's workshop was the really lovely fun part of the session this morning, and you've had the fun and now it's me just sort of chatting for the next sort of 25 minutes or so. Susie, I wonder if I could see the slides maybe a little bit, you know, if we
I'm just trying to get it into presentation mode. Gosh, we are being a nightmare for you guys this morning, aren't we? Just let me try again. Let me try the PowerPoint.
That's great. If you, are you able to go back to the beginning?
No, sorry.
That's all right. Shall I? I'm going to see if I can share.
Here we go.
All right. Have you? Oh, okay.
Right. I'm just getting it into presentation.
That's absolutely.
There we go.
Okay, Susie, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, well, I mean, as I'm sure probably Susie may have said earlier, we've just today really we were going to talk really a bit about NCACE, about what we're planning to do, why we're doing what we're doing, as well, to give you a sort of a sense of sort of some of the key areas that we're working on. And then we were going to talk a little bit about a piece of work that we've just recently undertaken, which is a survey that we undertook there just in March with arts professional to capture a little bit more information from the arts and culture sector about how they perceive and how they are in fact working with research and with universities. So very much this is what we're doing here. We're sort of championing knowledge exchange. And the reason that we're doing so is we feel, in particular with the arts and culture sector, you know, this is a sort of a really kind of huge area. I mean, REF alone, I think, tells us that of something like almost 7,000 case studies, 1,500 or so, according to a study by King's, are felt to be germane to the wider cultural and creative industries. And in our own work, we have found that at least 900, just over 900, actually have a relationship to the arts and culture sectors. So that's a very, very significant number of those REF case studies that to some extent or another talk about arts and culture and those relations. We are very recently set up, just this year, in fact, we had our launch back in January, and we're funded by Research England for the next 4 years or so. And we work with a whole range of partners across the UK who were mentioned there on the previous slide, but very much just to finish this slide very quickly, one of the key things really that we are sort of focusing on in the next 4 years. And this is why it's brilliant actually to be with you here today and to hopefully also kickstart conversations with you all going forward and involve you in work however you would like to be, is that we are really, really keen not only on building the collaborative potential to work with the sector, but I think also really importantly, focusing on evidencing what the kind of wider impacts of that work looks like, the social, the cultural and the environmental, as well as the economic impacts, of course, too. Susie, next slide, please. These are our 4 kind of key areas of work. Brokerage, supporting collaborations, supporting capacity development. Very importantly, we've just touched on that there now through the workshop that Susie's just led with you, evidencing I've mentioned, and also and as we would expect as well, showcasing and talking and communicating about this work as well. Thank you, Susie. And these very broadly are the 4 kinds of key themes that are that, again, there's no sort of major surprises. They're sort of big, what we could almost call sort of grand challenge areas. Quite a few of you already in that sort of very brief conversation there talked about place-making agenda. And we have, in fact, an event coming up very soon next week on that called Collaborations in Placemaking. I'll pop the link in the chat if there's time afterwards. And then these other 3 key areas as well, environment and climate change, tech for social good, and health and well-being. Thanks, Susie. So I'm going to just sort of give a couple of sort of quick headlines on each of the 4 key areas and what we're doing here. So brokerage, collaboration, support and networking very much is about sort of encouraging, you know, and fostering kind of really good environments in which to support knowledge exchange collaborations and to really actually look at smoothing out some of the sort of challenges that people might have from the arts in dealing with and developing connections with universities and indeed sort of vice versa as well. The whole issue of language and funding clearly emerged in your conversations here already this morning, and there are those and other factors you know that are sort of very, very key and critical. So through the course of the next 4 years or so, we're running lots of regular getting involved sessions. We're also running ideas labs as well, spaces to bring people together really to sort of talk about developing collaboration, and we're exploring funding for that activity too, and are inviting, in fact, universities who would like to also contribute to bring their own collaborations to bear to that pot, to be in touch with us as well. So Susie, next slide, please. Skills and capacity development, we've talked about, I think already through your sessions, your session earlier today. What we had spotted sort of over the last many years of our own work at TCCE was very much, you know, what we heard a lot from people, sort of anecdotally, was that there is a real lack, or there can be a sort of a lack of opportunities for, in particular, I think this kind of peer-to-peer learning and also professional development within this sort of very specific field. So, you know, that specific field, I think, really being, you know, about the collaborative space between research and the arts and culture sector. So we are planning to run an annual, and in fact, probably the next one will be Jan or February next year, but an annual event that actually sort of supports and showcases really good examples of models of exciting and really interesting knowledge exchange with the arts and culture sector, and perhaps even work that isn't strictly exciting, but that is nonetheless doing really good things. And if you are involved in any such collaborations or pushing those forward within your institutions and would like that opportunity to showcase, please do be in touch with us. We'd really love to hear what people are doing on the ground within their institutions. We're also doing really interesting leadership skills development work as well under this particular work package. So, for example, we started working with the CLOR leadership program and are continuing that work over the next 3 years now as well. So I'll take the next one, Susie. Evidencing and impact development. Again, you know, this sort of very much, I think, runs to the heart of the whole kind of NCACE endeavour. We think really that, you know, we just don't know quite enough yet. And I mean this in a very sort of broad way about the scale, about the extent, about the sort of motivations, if you like, the nature, also the history, and indeed those impacts, coming back to that impact question of knowledge exchange and the kind of wider relationships between research and the arts and culture sector. So, I mean, to that end, we're doing a number of different things, really, and I suspect in the course of the next sort of 3-4 years, we'll tip the iceberg of this these questions. So we are developing now an online repository, a kind of a library of resources that again talk to these models of good practice. So, you know, that might be case studies. There's a lot of really interesting reports already in the public domain that have been written over the years about this area. So we're sort of gently really bringing things together to actually create a sort of a space for people and a sort of a space for the knowledge really that we're starting to build in this field. Also, we'll be having annual policy events. So I just mentioned there the collaborations in placemaking event, which is happening next Thursday, and I'll stick the link in afterwards. But we also just there back in March started an evidence cafe. We did so really to just actually create a sort of a space. We're doing it every 2 months at the minute, but that might change, to bring people together who are really interested in the whole issue of evidence development. And when we say that, we're sort of thinking about that in a very broad way as well, both in terms of quantitative, but also qualitative evidence around these collaborations and around knowledge exchange in this particular field. So we've had a couple of very interesting sessions so far, and the next session's coming up in July, on July the 15th, I think it is. And Susie, the next slide, please. Showcasing and communications. We are planning again to have a festival every other year. So next year and in 2024, to really showcase some of the brilliant work that we do know is happening between these sectors. There really is a lot of activity, and we want to shine a light on that work. And again, we would invite you to be in touch with us if that's something that you would enjoy doing too. And then kind of more practically and on a more ongoing basis, we have a monthly bulletin and all the usual social media channels. I put the Twitter handle in there as well. We're also developing a lot of blog posts and encouraging, I think it's fair to say, kind of a community of writing really around this topic too. Susie, can I have the next slide, please? So yeah, that's just a sort of a snapshot of what we've, some of the kinds of activities that we've put on since our launch there, our kind of public launch back in February, the Power of Collaborative Action. So we've already sort of been producing a lot of activities in this relatively short space of time, sort of 4 or 5 months. And these are some of the things upcoming now later on in June and we've mentioned all of those. And then the next slide, Susie, please. And then just to sort of drill into again and talk a little bit more about this notion of NCACE as a sort of a community, really sort of as a community of writers about this area. I think very often, particularly within the knowledge exchange domain, you know, we have worked very, very closely in and with the knowledge exchange community since 2005. We know a little of what it's like. And I think, you know, there is real scope, I think, to talk more and write more and narrate more and evidence more the work that's being done in this field. So already these are just a few of the blogs that we've put up in the last few months. And they're a mixture of people who are involved in the authorship of this work as well, from academics themselves who are actually sort of working in knowledge exchanges. You can see there are people like Bamba Sayinka, who does a lot of work around citizen knowledge, for example. But then there are people who are also leading knowledge exchange models themselves, so models like Steam House in Birmingham, which is based at Birmingham City University, one of our partners, on kind of principles of collaboration, and then, you know, sort of other blogs that really sort of look at sort of key areas that relate to some of those 4 themes that we talked about. So, for example, again, back to placemaking, this notion of what is performed in thinking about notions of place at a time of pandemic, for example. So what is the academic community and the wider arts community, how they're coming together in this particular moment? Susie, thanks. So this is a sort of just like a little snapshot of you know, this is some nice numbers. We don't need to dwell sort of too long on this, but it's just a sort of a snapshot, I suppose, of you know, who we've been, how many people and so on have been engaged with us so far. And I think one of the things that's really, really interesting for us is just how many academic institutions have been engaging with us in the last 4 or 5 months. These are universities, but also IROs and other types of research organizations as well. So I think obviously that sort of demonstrates, you know, that there is a real interest in this area, and testimony to that is the fact that you're all here as well with us this afternoon. And then I'm going to talk a wee bit now about our arts and professional survey there, but this was something I said that we did in March to get a sort of a sense. We've got the ref, we're doing already work on the ref case studies, and previously others have done so as well, and the report on that's coming out soon. We've also got the KEF, and there's as you all know, you know, a lot of data about knowledge exchange, a lot of information about knowledge exchange and the various actors that are involved with that, and the various sectors that intersect with that coming out as well. But there's less information really coming the other way back. And, you know, in the instance of ourselves here at the National Centre, that is about information about the arts and culture sector. Susie and myself have been working in this field for a very, very long time, and have a very deep sort of, almost like a kind of a ethnographies really around this work, I guess. But actually sort of hearing from a very broad range of people around the UK was very, very fascinating. Now, this is a very quick and dirty piece of work. Arts Professional is one publication. It's read quite widely, but not absolutely ubiquitously in the arts and culture sector. So there are some sectors that it doesn't hit into quite so much. For example, the museums sector readership. So it was quick in the sense that, you know, it was a 3-week survey. So if you consider going back to what I was sort of talking about a little while ago there about, for example, REF, and we all know how long these processes take. So REF, we're identifying, you know, 900 odd evidenced impact case studies relating to arts and culture in some way. In this quick and dirty snapshot, 3 weeks, hastily constructed, we had about 540 odd responses, and about 84 of those people said that they had worked at least once, or in some instances quite a few times, quite, you know, very regularly with universities. And I mean, you would say, well, you would expect that number to be high, given the title of the title, which is Collaborations with Higher Education. So we fully accept that, you know, we will get that, but you know, have a high number of people who had already worked responding to that sector, and that was very much across arts and culture sector areas. So many people are working across various domains. The whole kind of inter and cross-disciplinarity is really big in the arts, working across different domains, performance and theatre, visual arts and music and sound, unsurprisingly being the other kind of 3 key areas. Susie, can I just take the next one, please? So what's quite surprising here is the way, you know, and again, there's some stuff here that kind of will come back to and chime with this earlier chat that we were all having about language, how we express the ways in which we work together. But very, very interestingly, from our perspective, at least 66 or 2/3 of the people who spoke to us said that they were directly involved in the co-design and production. And in fact, almost 50%, 46% said that they in fact were you know, led the collaboration. So they led the knowledge exchange or the partnership. And again, you know, very, very crucially for us, when we say knowledge exchange, we do really genuinely mean a sort of a 2-way sense of knowledge exchange, not kind of that old sort of school technology transfer where knowledge is originated at point A and gets neatly sort of packaged and delivered to point B. But I know many of you will also be working in this way as well. So this is sort of a snapshot of you know, the most of the key, you know, kind of key roles that were talked about. And interestingly there, a lot of people also were engaged, and again, this didn't surprise us too much, in teaching. There's a lot of academics, there's a lot of people working in the arts who also work in universities, and vice versa. You know, obviously many of us here will be very, very well aware of the rise of the academic, let's say, and the types of cultural production, if you like, the types of things coming out of these collaborations. Again, very, very broad, exhibitions, performances, installations. So stuff of the essence of the cultural production itself, but then also these other things. So the use of tech, you know, use of facilities, technologies, equipment, and that sort of thing. And then other pockets of research that are going on to inform other parts of the organizations, businesses as well, really. So, you know, things like evaluation being very, very pertinent at the minute. Susie, next slide, please. Again, very brief snapshot on the funding here. As many of you pointed out, you know, there are no sort of seamless and one model around the way in which these collaborations are funded at all. And this is sort of reflected through these figures. So many of the people who responded to us didn't put a value, because there probably wasn't one actually. But those who did, kind of quite interesting that a lot, you'll see here, about 15 or so of those people were involved in kind of really quite chunky projects, up to about 500,000 or so there. But obviously many also at the much lower end of the spectrum, those small scale collaborations of the kind that, you know, we're quite familiar with, and of the kind that can often be so catalytic in terms of actually developing other sorts of opportunities and ways of working into the future. And Susie, I think there might be another couple. And this just again, simple kind of note of some of the barriers that emerged really for people working with universities. Again, very, very common, just simply not really quite knowing how to go about establishing a collaboration, you know, knowing how to make things happen. Obviously, there's a sort of a paradox there, because of course 84% of people have worked with universities, so whilst they might not know how to go about it all that much, you know, they're still doing it. So people are finding ways to do these things. Again, interestingly, things there, you know, funding, of course, it emerges for all of us again and again and again, or should I say more precisely, probably the lack of it. So there's all of those barriers, you know, time, of course, again, we all will be aware of that. And we asked people to just talk about whether or not they'd been, that the work that they'd been doing with universities had in some way connected broadly to the themes that we'd identified, and they did, which was good. So 64%, almost 65% of the collaborations had some broad relationship to place or place making. And again, about 63% or so also to arts, health and well-being, and the other two areas, also quite significant numbers there, about a quarter each, saying that they've been involved in those areas. And then I think there's another slide, Susie. So, I mean, this was the point at which we were supposed to seamlessly go into Susie's presentation, where we were going to say, okay, now all of you can talk about barriers to collaborations, but we've done it the other way around. So I don't know where we're at on time. We can stop sharing the screen, but that's our details there. Oh goodness, yeah, we've got 3 minutes left.
We've got 3 minutes. Yeah, I was hoping to allow another 5, but I forgot that we are launching our KE Awards. So yes, so we've got 3 minutes before Rachel closes our session for us. My apologies, everyone, I forgot about that.
Okay, that's fine. So if there's any questions, I'm going to see if I can pop the collaborations into the chat as well.
Yeah, I've posted a few links in the chat as well. And just a reminder to everyone who's here that since you're logged on, you know, as a conference delegate, you continue chatting on the online community if you've got any questions that can't be answered here, and of course you can follow up with Susie and Evelyn through their Twitter feed and directly probably as well. So more opportunities there. Is there any final points either of you both want to make before we finish?
No, just to say thank you very much for joining us this morning, and I think as hopefully we've both made clear that we're very open to collaboration. It's our method of working, not just our interest in NCACE. So please do get in touch if you would like to engage with the work of the project in any of the ways that we've mentioned. We would really warmly welcome conversations going forward.
Fantastic. Evelyn, any final thoughts from you?
Just completely to second what Susie's said just there now, you know, we really, it's been really, really encouraging to have had so much contact already with so many people working within universities. We would love to hear from you. You know, there's plenty of opportunity. So do please drop us a line, and we will with you very, very soon. It's been a real pleasure.
And of course, next year, Evelyn, we will be in Brighton on the seafront.
Oh.
So you'll be able to join us in person and give us an update on NCACE and all it's achieved by then, I'm sure. Really
Oh, yeah, that would be lovely. And then we can all go to the beach.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Look forward to that. Thank you both very much. That's great.
Thanks so much.
And thanks everyone for coming. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.